I'm not sure I can do this.
Welcome to the rebellion.
Hey, welcome back to ScreenCrush. I'm Ryan Airy, and let's talk about all of the Easter eggs, references, and little things that we missed in Season 2 of Andor. Andor is an incredibly complex show, and the creators have been taking victory laps, offering new behind-the-scenes details. And we even got to talk to Tony Gilroy, and he revealed that they originally planned to include Leia in the series. So we'll watch that clip a little bit later on. But now, let's dive deep into this whole season and look back on even more details in this incredible show. As always, remember ScreenCrush is on all podcast platforms, and become a member of our merch store to get free stuff. Links below. So let's start with episodes 1 through 3. We're going to be talking to you guys about stuff that you've shared with us on our Discord server, on our Twitter, on Facebook, and StarWars.com also released all sorts of facts about the show, and we're going to take you behind the scenes with interviews from the writers, cast, and crew. The TIE Avenger that Cassian steals in episode 1 is actually a full interior and exterior set, which is pretty rare for a series to build. Now, that TIE fighter was originally featured in the 1994 computer game called TIE Fighter, but that version was more squarish than the Avenger we see in Andor, which was actually modeled more after Kylo Ren's TIE Whisper from The Rise of Skywalker. So the big reveal at the end of the TIE Avenger story is that they were actually stranded on Yavin, which shows how the rebellion evolved from idiots playing paper, rock, scissors into an elite fighting force. But the decision to set this on Yavin 4 was actually a coincidence. On StarWars.com, Andor creator Tony Gilroy said, "I was talking with lore advisor Pablo Hidalgo, trying to figure out what planet this could be set on, and it turns out that Yavin 4 hadn't been built at that point. It tied into this idea that we'd said before. The Cassian is at the birthplace of all these huge events. It's his destiny." And one of our Discord members, Carl Extrava, pointed out the infighting rebels in the jungle seem like a nod to Lord of the Flies. When Andor lands on the planet, he's looking for Porco, and in the novel, there's a character called Piggy. The whole setup, including the monster in the jungle, has parallels to the book. Great observation. The monster on Yavin is actually called a Dudar, and it's named after its designer, Alexander Dudar, who designed it to be like an alien hippo.
Yeah, that's no joke, man. Those hippos, they'll mess you up.
Oh, have you had any experience with that kind of thing?
I signed all kinds of paperwork, and I am not allowed to talk about it.
Fair enough. So when the Imperials arrive over Mina Rao, the scout craft is called an Imperial Scan Cruiser, and its design was lifted from the Gozanti Cruiser, originally created for Mandalorian Season 2. And this giant cow on Mina Rao was originally designed for Season 1 to be cattle on Aldhani. I'm guessing that it was too expensive to build these things just out grazing in the field, so they settled for just sheep instead. Now, Mina Rao, a planet covered in grain, was envisioned as this kind of a breadbasket to the Star Wars galaxy. Gilroy told StarWars.com, "I wondered where all the food comes from for Coruscant. I wanted it to be a successful community because so much of the show is about community and then the destruction of community. It's one of the great evils of tyranny and colonialism. It destroys communities." And they actually grew real crops for the shoot. Production designer Luke Hull chose a type of ancient rye grain, and they convinced a local farmer to grow that crop instead of wheat. Now, it took the crop a year to grow, which caused a problem when the SAG and writer strikes stopped production. So they had to harvest the crop, preserve it in sheets of polyester, and then reconstruct it on an indoor set in early 2024.
Oh, I feel terrible.
Why? Were you partying last night?
Oh, I'm so tired. I was up late at a work conference. Yeah!
I've worked late like that before too.
Yeah, now my whole day is wasted. I can't go to work or the gym. What rough beast have I become?
Oh yeah, man. I used to get like that all the time until I started taking pre-alcohol from Zbiotics. They're the sponsor of this video. Guys, Zbiotics pre-alcohol is one of my all-time favorite sponsors that we work with. Every time I have a big night out or even a little night out, I always pass these things around like they are party favors.
What is it?
Well, Zbiotics pre-alcohol is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle your rough mornings after drinking. You see, when you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in your gut. Now, it's this byproduct and not dehydration that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to help break this byproduct down. But of course, remember to drink this probiotic before drinking alcohol, drink responsibly, and get a good night's sleep to feel your best tomorrow. Anytime I go out, I always take a Zbiotics pre-alcohol. I want to be able to have a good time and work out the next day instead of being stuck on the couch.
I feel like I'm inside the couch.
So just in time for barbecue season, I highly recommend you stock up on Zbiotics pre-alcohol. Click the link in the description to get 15% off your first order at checkout. You can also sign up for a subscription using my code. And believe me, you're going to love this stuff and you're going to want to stock up. Zbiotics is backed with a 100% money-back guarantee, so if you are unsatisfied for any reason, they're going to refund your money, no questions asked. Just click that link below and you will not regret it. Now, back to what I was saying. So we're going to keep talking about how mostly everything in this show was practical, and they did not use the volume at all. For instance, Brasso's speeder was actually mounted onto a vehicle, which is frankly unusual. Usually Star Wars speeders are compiled with visual effects onto background plates. And they also filmed in a ton of real locations, which we did talk about in our episode 10 through 12 Easter egg video, when we mentioned that the Senate Plaza is in Spain and Saw's hideout is in the UK. But here's one that we missed. The mountain range in Chandrila is a real mountain range in Spain that envelops an abbey called Santa Maria da Montserrat. In fact, the mountain climbing sequence was one of the first scenes shot in March 2023 before the strike shut down production for months. And they also had to relocate the Moby house that Ferrick's crew stayed in. And just like the TIE Avenger, this was an interior and exterior set. In our previous videos, we did talk about how the Gorman Imperial meeting was based on the Nazi Wannsee Conference when they planned the final stages of the Holocaust. The castle was even based on Nazi strongholds, the Eagle's Nest and Hohenwerfen Castle. But what we didn't know at the time is that the view outside of this window is not CGI. This was a hand-painted backdrop, which then was digitally touched up by ILM. Electrical 5 pointed out a great detail from Denise Goff's acting. As Dedra is trying on clothes, she's also trying on smiles. And smiling is such a weird, unnatural act for her that you can actually see it kind of pains her face. But later on, when she's dismantling Edie, she has a more subtle smile, showing how much she is enjoying herself. And that's also the same smile that she gave Bix before she tortured her in Season 1. And just like in Season 1, the sets and buildings were all inspired by real-life places to give everything that Star Wars familiar but new feeling. Dedra's apartment in Coruscant was modeled after Torres Blancas, a modernist building in Madrid, Spain. And get this, we never see Luthen's docking bay for the Fondor, but ILM did design it, and it was circular like docking bay 94 from A New Hope. The scene where Mon Mothma welcomes people to her estate is filmed in a one-take shot to give the scene a sense of bustling urgency. But, wonders like this are rare for Star Wars stories, which are usually so visual effects heavy that they can't film long practical shots. But also, several of the guest speeders reused props from The Acolyte, which also reused a lot of speeders from Andor Season 1. Now, just like everything else in the show, Chandrila was constructed to feel like a culture that had evolved over centuries. The art department fused the look of historic Japanese stone castles and minimalist Scandinavian architecture, which has a focus on belonging with nature. And the main hall where the dance takes place is on a stone floor that features a large star map. Production designer Luke Hull said, "I always felt the best thing about the Chandrilians was that they were proud about their place in the universe, so the Star Wars map shows their position in the galaxy. And also, they created a smaller version of the floor for the Chandrilian embassy on Coruscant." Rebecca Alleyway, the set decorator for Andor, also took inspiration from the Chandrilian embassy. In Season 1, she dressed the embassy set with ikebana flowers. That's the Japanese art of flower making. So the wedding flowers are done in this same style. The wedding builds up to the murder of Tay Kolma, Mon Mothma's childhood best friend. And Tony Gilroy told StarWars.com that he wanted Tay to be like Fredo Corleone in The Godfather 2, somebody who had grown so weak that he became a liability when he betrayed the family. And just like how Fredo's death haunted Michael, Mon Mothma now has blood on her hands. As Gilroy said, if she doesn't do that though, the Empire wins. And I also belong to a great Facebook page about Andor and Rogue One, where Frederick Koyokan posted, "The wedding dance on Chandrila, as well as the wealthy and elite society, might be based on a Renaissance dance called the Moresca that was pictured in Franco Zeffirelli's Romeo and Juliet from 1968. At least I'm very much reminded of it. And that dance track at the wedding was actually used 3 times on the show. In Nemos, in the brothel in Morlana 1, and finally when Mon Mothma, to quote Tony Gilroy, is dancing to keep from screaming. Now let's talk about the Easter eggs in episodes 4 through 6. Brent Williams emailed us a good one. Every Star Wars movie features the Wilhelm scream. But we don't hear it in Andor, instead we read it. When Wilman breathes in the Rito, the caption reads, "Wilman screams." That's as close as we get to a Wilhelm in the show. And he also pointed out that in Rogue One, Saw Gerrera lost his legs, and Wilman is limping in the final episode. So maybe this is a side effect of the Rito. Also, John Wallace, the hand prop and weapons supervisor on both seasons of Andor, mentioned that Bix's pistol in Season 2 is the same gun as the one that Cassian uses to shoot Krennic in Rogue One. The idea was that Cassian would lose his hero gun, the MW-20, so he carries Bix's gun with him. Also, I have to recommend the Backstory podcast interviews with the writers of this series. Over 5 episodes, the writers dropped a lot of great behind-the-scenes Easter eggs. Bo Willman, the writer of episodes 4 through 6, pointed out that this line,
"But if I'm giving up everything, I want to win.
Is actually foreshadowing how Bix ends the series. She's another person who sacrifices what she wanted, a life with Cassian, in order for him to fulfill his destiny and defeat the Empire. Now this arc begins with Bix being shaken up because Cassian murdered an Imperial soldier in cold blood, but Willman said that the first scene in Rogue One is what inspired this. Audiences were introduced to Cassian murdering a fellow rebel in cold blood for the greater good. And in another Backstory podcast interview, Tony Gilroy revealed that after Bix tortures Gorst, he wanted her to take a bite of his little cupcake treat. He said, "They didn't want to do it, I was outvoted." But I have also seen theory posts on our Discord about how this murder actually saved the galaxy. If Gorst had been allowed to train others in his torture technique, then maybe the Empire would have gotten the location of Yavin 4 from Leia, and the Death Star would have destroyed the base on Yavin 4 before Luke Skywalker even joined the rebellion. Now the centerpiece of the season is Gorman, and the plaza set was more than 500 feet long, and it was built on the same Pinewood Studios backlot that housed the Jakku Village, Maz's Castle Ruins, Jeddah City, and Kessel in Solo. Now, the language of the Gore was actually created by the dialect coach Marina Tidal. Now, throughout the show, we noticed a few signs that are written in this language, but unlike Arabash, you can't translate their language based off of the Western alphabet. You can only read the signs if you actually speak the language of the Gore.
Do you understand anything they're saying?
Oh, yes, Master Luke.
And this establishes that their language is actually an independent language that evolves separately from Galactic Basic. In fact, they even created two different versions of the written language. There's Gorel or High Gore and Dixian or Low Gore, and the names are named after graphic designers Elle McKee and Lauren Dix. Everything in the design of Gore's fashion and setting was emulating a type of French adjacent culture. Like the French, the Gore are very prideful because across the galaxy, their planet's name is synonymous with beauty and culture. Tony Gilroy even pointed out that Palpatine's black cloak is made from Gore fabric. Also, in episode 7, we pointed out these interesting structures that they fly over, but I did not point out that we first saw these in the Gorman video from episode 1. These are actually the hatcheries where the spiders weave the silk, and this same design is repeated in the eaves of the hotel like we see here. Also, the Gorman front meets in the basement of a Twillery building. Set decorator Rebecca Alleyway pointed out that the meeting table was designed to be part of the manufacturing of Gorman silk, so everything in the show felt used and lived in. Although the Gorman culture was also designed to take influences from other parts of post-war Europe. The green colors worn by these workers were inspired by the avocado green bathing suits of 1970s Italy. This dog is actually a new Star Wars species created for the show. It's an animatronic with a collar that is written in the Dixian language that reads Elvis. So now Elvis is canon in Star Wars. Now let's go through the Coruscant storyline. The ISB operations room was another on-site location, shot in the McLaren Group's technology center in Woking, England. Now this is the same complex that served as Coruscant's transportation hub in Season 1. Now Andor famously did not film on the volume. That's the large virtual set of LED screens used in shows like The Mandalorian and Ahsoka. But in Season 1, outside Mon's apartment, ILM did use these LED stagecraft screens instead of green screens. These were used again outside the Coruscant safe house this season. And in this scene, to make it look like it was raining outside, they placed sprinklers between the LED screens and the windows. Now in Season 2, we see the return of Palpatine's podium from the prequels.
Empire!
The team actually had to recreate the podium and they nicknamed it the Taco Shell.
Oh, are those tacos? You better believe they're tacos!
And the round sofa in Mon Mothma's office is the same one used in the Chandrila embassy in Season 1, they just reupholstered it. And at Skulldun's party, Krennic's uniform features this kind of foppish dress cape, which the costume department made from a real satin fabric. When Ben Mendelsohn tried it on, he said, "I feel like Elvis." Now, one of the strangest storylines in this arc was Willman, the boy, working for Saw Gerrera. This was set on planet Dakar, which, yes, is the setting for Leia's resistance base in The Force Awakens, like we talked about in our Easter egg videos. But the asteroid belt around the planet was recreated by many of the same ILM crew who designed it in The Last Jedi. Visual effects supervisor Scott Pritchard explained that they did include a tribute to The Empire Strikes Back hidden in the debris. In The Empire Strikes Back, the original model makers used potatoes for some of the asteroids. According to Pritchard, our environment supervisor, Guy Williams, got some potatoes and shot some camera footage of them and then made CG versions. There's actually a few of them in the asteroid field around Dakar. Saw's rebels are eating this roast mastiff, of course the desert dog that we first saw in Attack of the Clones, but did you know that portions of it were actually edible so the actors could peel off pieces and eat them? And this character, Willman Pack, is actually named after writer Beau Willimon, but he was actually embarrassed by the tribute. He went to Tony Gilroy and said, "People are going to think I wrote that in," to which Gilroy replied, "Well, that's his name." And this arc also resolved what Tony Gilroy called one of the greatest remaining mysteries of Rogue One. What was Saw Gerrera sucking down in that movie? What was that thing? And the answer is rhydonium, a fuel that got him high all the time. But Gilroy actually based this on one of the greatest filmmakers of all time, Sidney Pollack, who owned his own private jet. See, Gilroy worked with Pollack on the film Michael Clayton, and he said Sidney used to fly his jet all over the place, and if you worked with him, the first thing he wanted was jet fuel. Instead of money, he wanted jet fuel. So the idea that Luthen could provide Saw with fuel on demand makes it great for Luthen, great for Saw, and great for the rebellion. So, unlike Saw, Sidney Pollack was not huffing jet fuel, but he did accept it in exchange for goods and services, just like Saw did. And now let's move on to episodes 7 through 9. Brent Williams emailed us this really good Easter egg. On Ferrix, Andor took Syril's blaster, and on Aldhani, Skeen asked where he got it from, and Andor says,
"Didn't get a name."
Which makes Andor's last words to Syril even more perfect.
Who are you?
And of course, this is the same blaster that Andor gave to Melshi that Vel recognizes here.
Who belongs to this?
I think that's mine.
And get this, Andor writer Tom Bissell confirmed that there was a deleted scene where Mon Mothma's husband Perrin told her that he actually knew she was in the rebellion and that he could have been trusted to help her. In the scene, Perrin said that he knew what she was planning all along, and the Empire used to interrogate him every week, but he never gave her up. It was going to be a double heartbreak with Mon Mothma walking away from her deadbeat husband, who was not actually a deadbeat. Dan Gilroy, Tony's brother, wrote the episode 7 through 9 arc, and he revealed that they spent about a half hour thinking of different spycraft signals that Luthen could use to communicate with Cassian, including chalk markings on the ground, like we saw in season 1, or leaving clues in a bookstore. But the apartment light was the safest option because they didn't actually have to leave the safe house on a regular basis. He also said that originally they wanted Bix and Cassian to have some sort of confrontation the night she leaves, but Gilroy thought this was too tragic. Instead, when Cassian says,
Nothing's worth more than this.
that triggers Bix into realizing that she has to realign Cassian's priorities, and that is the moment when she decides to leave him. He also revealed that Rylance wasn't always the person who killed Syril, and in earlier drafts it was Cassian, but Tony Gilroy steered it toward Rylance, presumably because this was Rylance's first truly violent action of the rebellion. He was always the man who advocated for peace and caution. Dan Gilroy also revealed that, tragically, he thought Syril would have joined the rebellion if he would have survived the massacre. This arc also shows how Cassian met K2, retconning a comic book that had already revealed this story. But originally they were going to devote an entire episode to this story. It was going to be a bottle episode set on a ship, akin to the Alien and Predator franchises. Cassian, Melshi, and Clea were part of a heist gone wrong, and K2 would have rampaged through the ship, like ripping off people's limbs trying to get to them. And Tony Gilroy actually applauded after they described this sequence to him in the writer's room. But ultimately, it was too expensive, and instead we got a story that fit in better with the overall narrative. But some of that rampage stuff stayed in the script, like when he uses Hirt's body as a human shield. And also, the droid that kills Rylance's daughter and the one who turns to Syril here, all of those are K2, indicated by the scuff marks on its chest. And during Mon Mothma's speech, the big point of tension is how long the Imperial broadcast would allow her to continue on. Now, in the show, it's because of two techs who couldn't get inside of the room to cut the broadcast. But originally, the writer's room had the idea that Davos Skolden was going to be the owner of the news station, and he was the one who facilitated the broadcast. Now, a lot of people asked why the Emperor even allowed Mon Mothma to speak. After all, we saw Darth Vader force choke a dude from a separate capital ship miles away. But Gilroy said that using the Emperor was never on the menu. The point of that scene is that it's a slow news day. They were going to bury the Gorman massacre. Now, Syril was always fastidious about fashion and his appearance. Back in season 1, he had his clothes especially made.
Have you modified your uniform?
Perhaps slightly. Pockets piping and some light tailoring.
And even though he's on assignment, I get the feeling that he slowly learned to love the people and culture of Gorman. By his final episode, he is fully dressed as a Gore with an overcoat that matches the locals. Like Sam said,
"You're right. You're not a tourist."
Costume designer Michael Wilkinson said, "Here's a person that is perhaps not the most expressive, open character, but we likened it to that first time you ever traveled to Europe. You arrive somewhere and everything seems so culturally rich." And so, I like to think that as Syril lived in Gorman, he was affected by the clothing there. He wanted a little bit of Gorman flavor for himself. He had a long, rich, dark brown woolen coat, and he styles it up with a beautiful velvet scarf and a beret. In a way, he's found his people. It's like finally, people who appreciate the difference between a color that's one centimeter higher. Wilkinson and Gilroy decided that the Gorman trench coat would actually be the signature garment of the planet. Said Wilkinson, "It's the sort of thing that if you had traveled back home from a trip to Gorman, people would say, 'Oh my gosh, is that a Gorman trench coat?'" So the last time we see Syril, he has bought that trench coat, and they also added a cape to the back because they knew he would be involved in a big stunt sequence with Cassian. Said Wilkinson, "We wanted a great silhouette that would move beautifully." And now let's move on to the final arc of the show, written by Tom Bissell. Here's an Easter egg that we missed that Today and Tor pointed out to us on Twitter. The symbol of Darth Revan's Sith Empire can be seen in the finale for Andor Season 2, stamped on the skull of a Gungan. And this is great because it ties back to my favorite, silliest fan theory that Jar Jar Binks was a secret Sith Lord. Because, you know, he did actually enable the Emperor's rise to power.
Misa propose that the Senate give immediately emergency powers to the Supreme Chancellor.
Now, the cat that goes up to Lonnie's body actually has a collar that reads Pix.
Pigs, come here, boy.
Named after a recently deceased dog of one of the visual effects artists. And I saw so many great observations on the Facebook page, Rogue One, and Andor fan page. For instance, Kevin Laracy pointed out that Luthen's knife shows up twice in Season 1, once on the Fondor, and then he brings it to his meeting with Saw.
Put it down or give it back.
Maybe this is because he always wanted to be ready to kill himself or others in order to protect the rebellion. When Melshi and Cassian are hanging out, they are drinking Revnog, the same drink ordered by the guards back in Andor Season 1, Episode 1. And the game they are playing is called Rianza. It was created by the Andor art department. The tiles were designed by graphic designer Elle McKee, who also crafted a full set of rules to play. She was inspired by both ancient Mahjong sets and modern-day dominoes. Later, when Cassian and K2SO leave to save Kleia, a voice tells them to return immediately.
You need to stand down and return immediately.
And that voice is actually Tony Gilroy. The ambulance on Coruscant was actually a revamp of Andor Season 1's Pre-More mobile TAC pod vehicle. And I hate that I missed this Easter egg. The hospital that Luthen is taken to is called the Lina So Medical Center. It's written in Arabesh at the top of the building, which was too blurry for me to read in the screener footage that I took my notes from. Now, Lina So was the Chancellor of the Republic in the High Republic era novels, which I love. She led the government when it was at its height, hence why a hospital is named after her. Mike Marciano on Facebook pointed out that Luthen's true last name, Lear, is not only an anagram of his alias, Luthen Rael, but it's also a reference to Shakespeare's King Lear, and that play is a political drama about an aging monarch dividing his kingdom between his heirs, similar to the life and death of Luthen. Over at New Rockstars, they pointed out that when Partagaz creates the cover that Kleia is infected by a disease, this is a clever callback to Andor Season 1 when he said this about his precious ISB.
"We are health care providers. We treat sickness. We identify symptoms."
In the flashbacks, they opted to not show the battle outside when Luthen and Kleia first met. Instead, they chose a radio play format where we only hear the battle outside. Now, they did this to save a lot of money, but also because the carnage is so much worse in your mind than if they would have showed us in person. And even though the scene mirrors how Marva met Cassian, this actually wasn't done intentionally. In fact, according to Tom Bissell, they had ideas for many other flashbacks that they ultimately cut. For instance, Luthen was going to buy Kleia a Fonder craft and let her explore it. Or they were going to show when they bought the antique shop. Now, by this point, their father-daughter relationship was solidified, and they interacted with a Coruscant real estate agent named Shani. This was meant to be the final flashback, and it's the two characters realizing, okay, we're going to make our home here. Now, they ultimately cut those flashbacks because it was hard to place more into the story after the explosions on Naboo. Plus, they cut a lot off the hospital mission where those flashbacks would have been inserted.
Or there was more hospital stuff?
Yes, actually there was one where a nurse pulled Kleia into an operation room to help and she has to try to get out, but then they removed it because, as funny as it would be, it felt like a tonal grenade compared to what Kleia was building up to doing. But we did get that scene on Naboo, the Emperor's homeworld. For this shot, the production went to Hever Castle in the District of Kent in England. Now, this was actually used in a deleted scene from The Phantom Menace, when the Jedi and Jar Jar enter the royal palace after escaping from a waterfall. Tony Gilroy told Backstory magazine that the interrogation room where Krennic and Dedra argue is actually the same set that Syril was brought into for his investigation in Season 1 for filing false purity reports. Gilroy refers to that as their first date. And many of you pointed out that the screen that is evaluating Dedra is formatted to look like this screen used to evaluate THX 1138 in George Lucas's first feature film of the same name. In past videos, we've talked about how the prison on Narkina 5 was meant to emulate the lives of the people who are working for the machines in THX. A ScreenCrush fan named Dan Workman also pointed this out in the finale. In the column of troops that run past Andor in the jungle, the soldier at the front is wearing the same collar piece as Cara Dune, implying that this rebellion shock trooper was training on Yavin. Now that could be, or remember, she was also from Alderaan, so maybe she joined up after the Empire destroyed her planet. And we also get the return of Pal from Rogue One, who was once again performed by creature coordinator Derek Arnold. On the Facebook page Star Wars Wholesome posting, Cooper Franklin pointed out that Cassian standing in his doorway one last time actually looks like the Andor symbol, bringing the episode and the series full circle. And back on Coruscant, in Bissell's original script, Krennic was the one who arrested Partagaz. However, Tony Gilroy wanted Partagaz fully eliminated from the canon, so he came up with the idea that he takes his own life once he realizes that the rebellion was unstoppable. Of course, after listening to Nemik's manifesto.
Remember that the frontier of the rebellion is everywhere. And even the smallest act of insurrection pushes our lines forward.
And according to Tony Gilroy's interview on Backstory, the sister dream sequence was actually not in the script. That was added in post-production. In fact, in early drafts of Season 1, Gilroy revealed that he had a rough idea of a melodramatic scene involving Cassian reuniting with his sister. But as the show went on, he realized that her absence was actually more interesting. Quote, "It informs the audience of Cassian's savior complex and his decisions in Season 2. And one Facebook user pointed out that the final shot of both seasons is something that Cassian unknowingly helped to make. The first season shows the planet killer he will help to destroy, and the second season shows the child he unknowingly made with Bix. This child gets a happy life in a free galaxy because of his decisions. In fact, the line,
I burned my life to make a sunrise that I know I'll never see,
is reflected in the final scene of Season 2. Bix and their child get to see that sunrise. But also, this final shot also applies to Cassian's ending on Rogue One. He also burned his life for a sunrise that he never got to see, the birth of his child. Gilroy explained that final shot to Vulture magazine, saying, "I knew it would be beautiful and graphic, but not sentimental. I wanted it to be more like a Soviet propaganda poster than a Hallmark card." And if you stay past the credits, once the Andor music ends, John Williams' Star Wars theme plays.
John Williams and the London Symphony Orchestra, everybody!
And this signifies how this show and Rogue One are about to lead into the original trilogy. And finally, I was able to interview Tony Gilroy and Genevieve O'Reilly. Now, I was extremely nervous and starstruck, and I didn't do a very good interview. For instance, I told Genevieve O'Reilly that I think of her as the leader of the galaxy first and an actor second. There's a part of me who knows that you're an actor and knows that's a character, but then there's part of me who watched those Revenge of the Sith deleted scenes and said, "Why aren't these in the movie? These are amazing." And when I asked Tony Gilroy if he considered using other founding rebels like Ahsoka Tano, he gave me a surprising reply.
We sketched the Leia scene at one point early on.
Now, he didn't elaborate much on that point, but that is an interesting thought. We know from the novel Leia, Princess of Alderaan, that she didn't discover her dad was working with the rebellion until about 3 BBY. In other interviews, Gilroy said that Leia was going to appear in the Senate Party storyline, showing her intersecting with Mon Mothma's story. But that would have amounted to just a cameo. But it would have been neat to see Leia in those circles because she was a senator, or at least a senator's daughter at the time. But instead, we see Bail Organa leaving the party early.
That was my last investiture party of the season.
Oh, don't tell me you've left Paul Breyer up there all alone.
No, we had to split up to cover the rounds.
I think it would have also been cool to see her have a role in Mon Mothma's speech in the Senate. She could have helped the broadcast continue on by stalling the ISB. That would have been a neat homage to her first appearance when she sent a broadcast out to Obi-Wan Kenobi. But as it is, I think a Leia cameo would have been too distracting. What do you guys think? Should they have kept the Leia cameo in? Should she have been a more central character in the story? Are there any observations that we missed? Let me know in the comments below, or at me on Twitter, Blue Sky Threads, or on our free-to-join Discord server. It's like the internet before it turned awful. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.